sources, including social media channels. This compelled each one of us to deliberate on laws revolving around free speech, censorship, and media regulations. Now I shall pass it on to Dipanshu to introduce our guests.
Thank you, Simran. To discuss these issues, I welcome a very special panel on behalf of the entire Society for Advancement of Criminal Justice. Today, we are having with us Mr. Manish Tiwari, a member of Parliament, as well as a former minister for the Affairs of Information and Broadcasting. I welcome you, sir. Today, we are having with us also Mr. Pratik Sinha, co-founder of Alt News. We also welcome Mr. Paranjoy Guha Thakurta, an independent journalist, an advocate, and a visiting faculty at several eminent institutions across the country. In the panel, we also have Mr. Shivam Shankar Singh, an author of the book How to Win an Indian Election, and a data analyst who was formerly associated with a major political party of the nation. I would also welcome Professor Dr. Kavita Singh, an eminent academician and an author who has substantially dealt with issues concerning criminal law reforms, the legal framework, and regulation for news media, etc. Dr. Singh will also be moderating the event. Now, Mr. Ashish Goel, a Supreme Court advocate, would also be joining us in few minutes. I heartily welcome all the dignitaries to our program. In this discussion, we shall deliberate upon, we can academically and critically engage upon various factors around disinformation as well as fake news. We shall explore the criminal law aspects, constitutional aspects, as well as media law aspects of it. Now, I would like to request Professor Dr. Kavita Singh to please start a discussion. I would also like to request her to unveil our new logo. For the information of our audience, the Society for Advancement of Criminal Justice has come up with a new logo, which is to be unveiled today. Now I request Kavita ma'am to please take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Dipanshu. Thank you, Simran. Before I start with the actual theme of the panel discussion today, I would just like to say a few words about this society. And this is a students' academic society, or I would say only academic society in the Students' Juridical Association, which is deeply engaged in academic discourse. And time and again, along with the different types of activities which the society does, in which the students involve serious discussions on reforms required, as well as policy matters are taken up, and students engage themselves along with the other activities. And this is a society with students of more than 30 in numbers, and they are very, very efficient students. So you can see that because of their effort, we are here today in this panel. Now, as I was talking about the society is under the school which is there in the university, School of Criminal Justice and Administration. And so the students actively participate in the school event as well, like organizing conferences, organizing workshops, and students involved in research activity of the school as well. So in 2020, we were able to participate. We were able to engage in and help the committee which was set up recently in 2020 to suggest reforms in the criminal justice administration. So for that, I would thank the students once again. And now I come to the main topic. In the today's panel discussion would be based on the fake news which is going around in the society, and which takes because of these fake news, there are a lot of human loss as well as property loss, and that creates a lot of issues that is, who will be made accountable, how they would be made accountable. And as we are talking about fake news in India in particular, so we know that there are fake news in the print media as well as in the virtual media and the social media. So there are three avenues to it, and dealing with the problem with sophisticated technology, use of technology is a great challenge to the society at large. In one hand, on the other hand, it is a challenge for the lawmakers and the policymakers as well, how to plug the loopholes which are there in the system and deal with the problem. So, and in today's time, if we see that use of internet is on rise, and even a person who is not literate can actually use the internet space to spread the news. So maybe the news has been generated at one point of time and at one place, but it takes only seconds to uh, exchange hands and people. Within seconds, it reaches down to a larger audience. And by the time the loss which has to take place has already been taken. So what happens is that we are in a real threat in today's time. Another aspect of it is that these fake news are created by people who are being paid for doing so, and they are engaging themselves in such a manner that they are not been caught. So they work in such a manner that they would not be ever traced by the law enforcement agency, and they would escape the whatever punishment or laws we come up with. So this is one on the one hand. The other hand is on the other hand is that the government are also using using the threat of fake news to clamp down the free speech. Now so we will have to engage into the aspect of free media or free speech, and to what extent free speech would be allowed, how it will be allowed, how it will be regulated, and who will be responsible for regulating it. So this is a real challenge in this time. Now, if we talk about particularly in India, the problem is that the misinformation and the disinformation spread in the media is becoming very, very serious concern. Now, this leads to poisonous atmosphere, and there are riots and lynching taking place, and we have a series of examples of it. So I would not point out all here, but when we are talking about the age in the age of internet, the use of WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter, these are few social media platforms which are highly being misused. So this is a serious problem because there are rumors spread, morphed images are spread. There are motivated stories there, and unverified informations are planted stories are uh, there easily spread. Now, when we talk about online rumors, killing of innocent people because of these rumors, and leading to loss of human being and property is my great concern, being a criminal law teacher. And you know. There are certain rights which are given to the citizen of India, and curbing those rights in the name of say no free speech. I am very much concerned that in that case, what happens, we as an academician, when we share our views on certain points, that those can also be struck down and taken differently by the people and the society as well. But there can be a healthy criticism, or the ideas which we share may be acceptable or may not be acceptable. but there can be a debate or discussion going on, but curbing the right which we have to share our views. I think that needs to be taken, and how to make that balance, how to keep that balance in the system is more important. So this is all what I would like to speak, and I would now start with we have actually divided the discussion into three themes, and in each theme we will be talking about it. And so I will introduce the theme to the panelists, and one by one I will be asking the panelists to speak on it for maybe 1.5 minutes, and then we would take a few questions which would be there in relation to the theme, which I would like to ask to the panelists by naming them. So this is how the pattern we have thought about of this discussion. So the first theme which we have today is the definitional problem of fake news and conceptualizing the problem relating to fake news and disinformation which has been spread due to fake news. Now, as I was telling, that we are having a lot of examples from from our own country, that the people are involved in spreading fake news. And to start with, that is Muzaffarpur riot in 2013, if we talk about. Then the Malda riot, which we had in West Bengal in particular, from where we belong. Then we will see that UNESCO had declared Jana Gana Mana the best national anthem in the world in WhatsApp. Then the Daud property worth 1,500 crore seized in Dubai. President Kovin making Twitter debut, gained 3 million followers in 1 hour. Non-Strandamus had predicted the rise of Supreme Leader Narendras. Then fatwa in Saudi Arabia, men can eat wives when hungry. So GPS tracking nano chip in 2000 rupees note. Then salt shortage rumor in 2016, child kidnapped rumors leading to lynching and mob lynching in Jharkhand. So these are few examples from India and abroad, which has created a huge problem in the world. So to start with, now I would call upon our panelist Shivam Shankar Singh to first give his views on this theme, and then we would go further. Shivam ji, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, SACJ and NUJS, for organizing a talk on such an important topic. I think, as Kavita Singh ji just pointed out, it is incredibly important for us to understand what the definition of these things are. Most people just use fake news and disinformation interchangeably, but these aren't the same things. So I would actually like to split the definition of these things into a couple of different components. One is fake news, that is certifiably false information that is presented as being true. Another separate thing is just wrong news. Sometimes there are wrong news stories that come out that have some factual inaccuracies and are spread, which is not exactly the same as fake news. Then there is something called disinformation, which is basically fake news used to spread a specific message within society. So if someone spreads one content of news that is false, it doesn't make it disinformation. Disinformation is a campaign built to create a certain narrative, to create a certain atmosphere. And for that, a lot of different fake news pieces could be used for furthering a very specific thought process in the minds of individuals. Then there is an entirely different concept of information operations or information warfare, which basically intermixes fake news and real news. And the ultimate agenda is to create a certain narrative or to spread a certain message amongst the population. So if you look at something like elections and politics, then it is not just a question of one particular piece of fake news or countering that. If you look at national security and something like Russia interfering in US elections, then even that isn't a matter of one fake news story or one piece of false information. These are entire information operations which combine true news stories, fake news stories, and present it in a manner with inorganic amplification so that a certain narrative can be spread across society. So what we need to differentiate between when coming to the legal aspect is, do you punish the originator of fake news? Do you punish the spreader of fake news? Do you try to take action against people who are just amplifying the content? Do you differentiate between people who are amplifying the content for money or people who just truly believe in that message and end up amplifying fake news? So even before we develop a framework for it, I think it would be important to discuss what the motivations are, and do we even want separate motivations to be characterized in separate manner within the laws?
Thank you, Shivam-ji. Now I would call upon Pratik Sinha ji, please, if, on your view on definition and conceptual problem of fake news and disinformation.
Hi, thank you for having me here. I would just like to make a pedantic correction in Shivam's definition. I mean, at least from a technical point of view, as a practitioner, we hardly use the phrase fake news anymore. It's usually misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation can be one or multiple cases of false information, but misinformation means that you are not aware that you're forwarding something which is essentially false in nature and yet end up pushing it forward. While disinformation is when you know something is false and push it. And when the sort of campaigns that we are seeing these days in both politics and health, etc., they are a combination of misinformation and disinformation. For example, the other day I came across a video on Facebook where this person had taken a tawa, in which you make roti, and put a lot of salt in it and was heating it on a stove, and then eventually he started sniffing off it, and he claimed that if you do this, this is going to raise your oxygen level. It has helped my entire family. Now, this person may be the originator of the information, but he is also coming from a place of ignorance. So how do you define whether this is misinformation or disinformation? So the definitions are also not very clear. It depends on, there are multiple nuances to the issue. But coming to the subject, this is something that, I don't have a degree in law. My only understanding of legal jurisprudence is because my father was a lawyer in Gujarat High Court. And of course, I have no experience in lawmaking whatsoever. But having been a practitioner, as in having worked on this issue in the past 4 years, this is a question that has come up in every conference that I have attended as to what should be the legal framework around this issue. And I have put some thoughts around it. So in my opinion, what these different platforms look like, that is, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, WhatsApp, they look like different cities, with very complicated traffic networks. And there are people who have, once you have an account, you have a license to operate on these roads. And from a legal framework point of view, one may look at it that way. Of course, there are differences between a traffic system of a city and what we are seeing these days. But as far as legal jurisprudence is concerned, I feel that this model may be the closest to, as in the issue of misinformation and disinformation and social media, may be closest to the way we deal with traffic offenses. So those are my initial comments.
Thank you, sir. Now I would like to call upon Paranjoy Guha Thakurta sir to give his opinion.
Thank you, Dr. Kavita Singh. Before I move ahead, I just wanted to correct Dibangshu, who described me as an advocate, if I heard him correctly. No, I have never studied law. I try and understand the law. I try and understand laws as they pertain to the working of the media and mass communication. Then I believe it's a very, very important issue that you are discussing today. So I want to congratulate Dipanshu, Simran, and all the students of the National University of Juridical Sciences, Kolkata, for for deciding to have a discussion on the subject. Now, already Shivam and Pratik have already outlined the key issues. As soon as you start giving very, very clear, watertight definitions of these terms, fake, false, misinformation, disinformation, in my opinion, you will come across contentious territory. You won't have a simple consensus. Yes, okay. We say you can be genuinely misinformed and therefore you can say something which later turns out to be incorrect. So you can be misinformed now, and 1 hour later when somebody has pointed out that you made a mistake, you correct yourself. Disinformation, you're saying, okay, is you know something is false, you know something is fake, but you're doing it because there's a motivation. You might be paid, you're trying to impart a message, there could be a commercial motive, there could be a political motive, whatever it is. But I think as soon as you start getting into definitions, you enter into problematic areas. I think you have to look at a slightly bigger picture. Why are we discussing it today? It's not as if falsehoods, fake information, half-true information, motivated information, political propaganda, other kinds of propaganda are new. Nothing new. They've always existed. Rumors have existed from time immemorial. We are discussing today because it has become, in this day and age of the social media, we are seeing an explosion of misinformation, disinformation, and fake news. Why? Because the internet has provided you the means, the speed and the scale with which you can distribute and disseminate information is unprecedented. I mean, just look at a few facts about India. I mean, we can look at the world, but just look at the few facts about India. Here we have a country with a population of about 135 crore, roughly 1.35 billion people. Now, according to the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, the number of SIMs or subscriber identity modules is over a billion. It's about, I mean, the last time I looked at this figure in the TRAI's website, it was about 115 crores. So 1.15 billion. That means most parts of India, there are more SIMs than human beings. Now you look at the number of voters. In the 2019 Lok Sabha elections, there were roughly 90 crore or 900 million voters. That means on the 1st of January 2019, there were 900 million, 90 crore Indians who were eligible to vote. That means they were above the age of 18 as of the 1st of January. Compare this figure, 900 million, with the number of mobile phones there are, cellular phones. Now, again, we don't have precise estimates, but it could be somewhere in the region of about 750 million, 75 crores. Now, look at the number of users. Now, out of these 750 million, we don't know how many are smartphones, but there are quite a few. Some would say about half, some would say less, some would say more. But WhatsApp alone claims it has 400 million users, 40 crore users in India. WhatsApp alone, by its own admission. According to the government of India, that number is higher. It's perhaps closer to about 50 crores. So,
sorry to disturb you. You have to be very brief and come to the point.
I'm just stopping in 1 minute from now. So I think it's more important not to get caught up with definitions. We have to look at the conceptual terms. Okay, there are laws. There's the Indian Penal Code and the Criminal Procedure Code against spreading falsehoods, against spreading information that causes disruption to public order. I think it's more important to talk about that. And I think the biggest issue that we are really talking about is the anonymity aspect of the social media. Though you don't know who are the people, you don't know where they are located. And as we are talking, and I'm sure there are others, we can discuss this in greater detail, there is a debate going on between the government of India and social media platforms, including WhatsApp and Twitter, about the originator of content and how the technology, the end-to-end encryption does not allow these platforms to tell you who is the originator of the content. I think these are the most important issues. I stop.
Thank you, sir. Now I would like to call upon Manish Tiwari ji for his opinion, because this information is not just black and white, and there is so many gray areas when we are conceptualizing the problem and we are looking into the definition of it. So over to Manish Tiwari ji.
Ma'am, I believe sir has some internet connectivity issue on his end, and we haven't, like, he is not there in the meeting right now. Maybe.
Okay, he was there, but I saw him.
Yeah. Maybe he is having some internet connectivity issue. We also have Ashish sir. So.
So now I would like to call upon Ashish. As Ashish was not there at the beginning, Ashish is one of our student from NUJS, and he is now practicing in Supreme Court. He has done his master's in international taxation, and he was director of this society's SACJ, and a close association with him and his work with NUJS keeps on going on. And so, Ashish, please, your opinion on the conceptualization and definition of fake news and misinformation or disinformation, as Pratik Sinha ji said.
First of all, let me thank the Society for Advancement of Criminal Justice at NUJS for providing me this opportunity to share my views and engage with the diverse group of people on such an important topic. I'm delighted to be a part of this discussion, which I believe would be intellectually stimulating, not least because I was associated with the society as its director between 2010 and 2012 during my undergraduate studies at NUJS. And it's amazing to see the society grow under the leadership of Dr. Singh and a passionate group of students like Dipanshu, who I'm told has worked on Sundays, to bring this discussion to all of you. Now, coming to the topic, the downside of being the last in the panel is that pretty much everything is covered by the time we begin to speak. But I largely agree with people who've just spoken before me that we need to cope with many definitional and conceptual hurdles when we come to define fake news. I personally have qualms about the usage of the term fake news, because news as we traditionally understand cannot be fake, because news is based on credible, objective sources, and something that is fake, in my opinion, cannot be termed as news. So fake content, to use a better word, would ideally bring into its fold multiple categories of content, both online or offline. But not all kinds of fake content warrants the attention of the law, the interference of the law. For instance, misinformed content, as Shivam just spoke about, or factually inaccurate content may evidence poor, research or journalistic skills, and is indeed difficult to write a 100% accurate story, especially when we have laws such as the Official Secrets Act and also the RTI, the Right to Information Act, that allows non-disclosure of information on certain grounds. So you cannot be 100% correct on the news stories that you write. So this is something that we need to keep in mind. I believe fake content or disinformation should be classified based on the degrees of falsity and intentionality. One way to look at fake content or disinformation is to identify the specific harms that that fake news or fake content causes, and that is where we also need to make a distinction between misinformation, as Shivam pointed out, or something as simple as telling a lie, from something that is dangerous, for instance, propaganda or media bias, and something so dangerously misleading that, for instance, you have a fabricated picture of a group of, say, Muslims beating up a Hindu in a Muslim-dominated village. A big problem with fake news is that, it delegitimizes objectivity and a rational public discourse around social, economic, and political issues around us, and it would become important for us as rational human beings in society, in a society run by constitutional values and principles, to perhaps even not even consider the intention behind the creator, instead focus primarily, if not wholly, on the harm that fake news or disinformation inflicts on all of us. In the view, the most dangerous kind of fake content or disinformation is associated with increasing politicization of issues as we see it happen in the recent years under the prevailing dispensation, and building false narratives around political parties and politicians to manipulate the outcome of elections. And this is something that, again, Shivam has written an entire chapter in his book, How to Win an Indian Election. And you cannot deny that our beliefs and ideologies are influenced by what we read online or what we see online. And we've seen this during the US presidential elections, and we've seen this happening even in India in general elections as well as in assembly elections. So fake content and disinformation, in my view, flourish in a society where there's lack of trust in the system and in the mainstream media. With the rise of what journalists like Paranjoy, who's here with us, would term it as paid news or advertorials, people seem to have lost trust and credibility in print newspapers and even some online TV channels. A vast majority of Indians think that these newspapers and TV channels have turned into lapdogs. Now, again, as Paranjoy mentioned, the rise of smartphone use across the country and low data costs. We've seen a migration because of this from TV screens to touch screens.
Ashish, if you can just
rise.
Ashish,
I'll quickly sum up. So So what I'm trying to say is that we all have this tendency of cherry picking, news stories that suit our own, or reinforce our own ideologies and beliefs, or what is known as confirmation bias. I don't we often unfollow, those on Twitter whose political views we are opposed to or, disagree with. And don't we tend to give credibility to accounts with blue ticks and with millions of followers. But having said that, I do realize and feel that it is important to narrow down the concept of fake content. And unless we do that, we will not be able to come up with appropriate and targeted legal solutions to deal with fake content. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish. Just to sum up this theme which we have discussed just now, that the problem is of very grievous nature. And so having a one definition, it will not be appropriate to deal with all kind of misinformation and disinformation or faking the news item. So I also agree with all of you, but in a policy making process and then coming up with a proper regulation or law, we need to have very broad definitions whereby we would be able to cater all the needs of the society, which would have the elements which will take care of the misinformation and disinformation. People who are responsible for it has to be made accountable for it, be it print media, be it electronic media, or be it social media. So now I open the next theme. Our next theme is fake news, free speech, and Article 19 of the Constitution of India. So, our Constitution of India has provided us with the right of freedom given in Article 19, with a view to guarantee individual rights that were, considered vital by the framers of the Constitution, and right to freedom of speech in Article 19. That is freedom of speech and expression in 19 has, is one of the freedom in it. And what happens is that in a healthy democracy, freedom of speech is a need of the hour. Otherwise, importance of having this right given to the citizen would not be useful if the society or the people in the system do not come to know where the government is going wrong, or where the government is going right. And because at the end of the day, the recipients of a good governance is the citizen of the country. And the fourth estate, as we say, it plays a very important role in democracy. And keeping in mind in today's time, the need of the hour is that if there are, information disseminated which are not really in existence, then in that case, where to draw the line, how to put the restrictions, and how to use those restrictions is the need of the hour. So now, Dipanshu, did Manishji join?
No, I don't think we are having him.
So we go by the way we have started. And again, here I would say 1.5 minute time, because due to constraint, we will have to touch upon every issue. So I hope that all the panelists will stick to the time. Now I would call upon Ashish again to start with here, because you were the last one who spoke in the last discussion. So be very brief, your opinion on the free speech and restriction in misinformation or disinformation, where to draw the line. Ashish, quickly, 1 minute or 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, ma'am. Once again, when we talk about constitutionally protected speech, what do we really mean? Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution guarantees right to freedom of speech. Of course, this is not an unqualified right. Article 19, Clause 2 allows the state to impose reasonable restrictions and provides different heads under which speech can be restricted. What are these heads? Sovereignty, integrity, defamation, security of the state, incitement to offense, public order, decency, morality. Essentially, what this really means is that the state can control the content of the speech, but it also controls the consequences of the content. Of the speech. So, for instance, a cartoon depicting nudity may not cause actual harm to anyone, but the state can still regulate it because it thinks that the obscene content of this nature is against, the Indian culture or decency. We must understand that mere false or inaccurate statements or lies can be constitutionally protected speech. I mean, there is no specific Indian Supreme Court judgment to which I can refer to you all, but if you read a 2012, if I'm not wrong, judgment of the United Supreme Court of the United States, the court protected inaccurate false statements. So misinformation is constitutionally protected speech. Now, remember, fake content or misinformation is not mentioned as a head under Article 19, Clause 2, under which speech can be restricted. What we do need to worry about are statements that have a real and an imminent risk of harm arising from speech, and not because someone somewhere thinks that such statements will result into violence or public disorder. And even there, we need to see what the options the state has. We cannot straight away criminalize speech. We cannot even straight away shut down the internet or take down content, instances of which we have seen multiple times in recent years. So what do we do really? We need to identify the least intrusive measure, the least restrictive measure to restrict speech. So if you have an option between internet shutdown and blocking URLs, you block URLs because it is less intrusive. It's as simple as that. And we need to identify if a particular content was uploaded out of malice or not. This is very important. And I must also point out that this, as Paranjoy mentioned in his introductory remarks, the scale and speed in which content diffuses online is something that we must worry about more than the content itself. So in my mind, the first thing that we need to do is we need to clearly define and limit what we mean by fake content. Over broad restrictions on speech will suffer the same fate that Section 66A of the Information Technology Act had suffered. And the second thing that we need to do is we need to assess and identify what are the least intrusive measures that can be adopted or spread to prevent proliferation of dangerous online content as well as offline content. Now, why is this important? Because first of all, such kinds of restrictions have a chilling effect on free speech. Now, people will self-sponsor or pre-sponsor before they speak their minds out on social media and elsewhere. And you're striking not just at speech, but at the very thought process itself. You're giving a free hand to government instrumentalities to abuse laws in a manner that is self-serving. I mean, we have seen in recent times, how sedition and defamation laws being misused, and there's no reason or explanation. Just 2 more seconds, ma'am. What I was saying is we've seen, in recent times how sedition and defamation laws being misused, and there's no reason or explanation why a similar thing will not happen in the event that a legislation is introduced to restrict speech on the ground that it is fake news. This will homogenize political narratives and silence political dissent. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish. Now I will call Paranjoy Guha sir for his opinion on media trial as a huge role in circulation of the and dissemination of the fake information, and how criminal law enforcement can be there from the constitution point of view.
Madam, media trial is another huge issue, and I don't know whether we have the time to deal with the whole issue of trial by media. We already have a law commission report on it, and this whole issue of reporting what is sub judice, and the whole issue of what should be contempt of court, or the use, and I would say misuse of the provisions of contempt of court. I think Ashish Goel has he's very succinctly summarized the key issues that are involved. I want to add a few points to what he's already said. Firstly, I think it's not so much Article 19(1)(a), but Article 19(2). It says reasonable restrictions. Now, this word reasonable is the problem, because it is open to interpretation. Who says what is reasonable and what is not reasonable? Who decides that? Today, we have in our country innumerable instances of people taking the law into their own hand. So if your local mafia don doesn't like you, then your freedom of expression does not matter. So is it the local don, is the station house officer, or do we have to wait for the Inspector General of Police or the Chief Justice of India to rule what is a reasonable restriction, not? The second point, I think, as we've already found in the Shreya Singhal case, where the Supreme Court struck down certain provisions of the Information Technology Act. Now, what we are seeing is actually the government trying to bring back those same provisions through the back door. And as Ashish rightly pointed out, look at the Supreme Court's judgment in the Vinod Dua case, which was as recently as Thursday. The whole issue of sedition. Who decides what is sedition? I mean, here you're dealing with a colonial era provision in the Indian Penal Code, 1860, a provision which was essentially brought after 1987, the Sepoy Mutiny or the War of Independence, to silence nationalist
this is the next theme. So this is the next theme.
We'll talk about that.
Yes, you will have ample opportunity if you restrict yourself on the. Sure.
All right. So I think the last point that I want to make, I think what also we need to do is the decriminalization of defamation. We know Justice Deepak Mishra's bench said it should remain. In my opinion, he sought to find a balance between the individual's right to reputation and the right of the people of this country, every citizen, the fundamental right to free speech and expression. He said these are kind of on balance. In my opinion, no. I think most countries in the world, defamation has been decriminalized. I'm happy if defamation is made a civil offense. I'm personally from my own experience, I have many instances of, I have personally had many experiences. I've seen what Ashish Goel talked about, the chilling effect. In my opinion, this is a very important aspect of the law. The need to decriminalize. How do we need a bigger bench of the Supreme Court to review the judgment of the bench by Justice Deepak Mishra, or how do we change? I mean, how do we decriminalize? That is an issue that can be discussed. But I think that that's really what I wanted to add to what Ashish Goel said.
Thank you, sir. Now I would call upon Shivam ji. How do we reconcile a fundamental right to speech and expression and a law dealing with fake news while maintaining status quo?
So here is the tricky part. We have to acknowledge who enforces the law in this country. It's supposed to be the courts, but before any case reaches the courts, it's actually the government that decides, okay, we want to prosecute this matter. We want to prosecute this person for, say, sedition, or for circulating fake news that has led to loss of life somewhere, or for circulating some content that they've deemed inappropriate. The authority that decides to initiate action is the government. Right now, the discussion that's happening between the right to free speech and the need to control disinformation and things, fake news that leads to violence in the country, it's happening because what we've now started to see is that the government uses all of these provisions to also quell criticism against itself. In this kind of a situation, when you're designing any kind of law to regulate speech, you also have to design a mechanism that is so succinctly framed that the government has no space for interpretation. As soon as Paranjoy Guha Thakurta ji said, if there is space for interpretation, like reasonable restriction, the word reasonable is up to debate, then the government will use it to mean that, okay, fake news that helps our cause is okay, and the fake news that harms our cause or is against us is not okay, and we're going to initiate action and prosecute. This fundamental dichotomy that exists because there is a lack of morality in the system. There's a lack of morality from the people who are there to start prosecuting others based on a moral argument of what kind of speech should be regulated and what shouldn't be regulated. And in this kind of a circumstance, there are only two pathways forward. Either we do not give the power to the government to regulate most things that have not led to real consequences in the real world, and we actually take it as far as being a parking ticket or a speeding ticket, as Pratik Sinha mentioned. That is a reasonable way of doing it. The other way is to leave it absolutely up to the platforms that Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp themselves engage in self-regulation like traditional media in this country does. The reason that the media is supposed to be self-regulated is so that the government does not take over and control the entire media ecosystem and apparatus. So there are already these arguments that have happened, and across the world, if you look at what nations are doing, no authoritarian nation is trying to regulate speech the way, no like a democratic nation is trying to do it the way that authoritarian nations do. In India, the government wants to be the authority to decide. On the other hand, in a lot of major democracies, they have actually settled this argument in the favor of platforms regulating themselves and there being absolutely transparent regulations and oversight bodies on platforms that decide. So that is the other way to go about it. India as a country has to make a choice on what direction we head. Do we want the government to be all powerful in regulating platforms and regulating speech, in determining what is fake news and what's not, in determining what is disinformation and what's not? Do we trust the government enough? Or does this process have to be out of the government's control? This is the argument that needs to be settled.
Okay, thank you, Shivam ji. Very quickly now to Pratik ji. Actually these questions which I am putting to all the panelists are from the questionnaire which we had distributed prior to the program being conducted. And so that is how I am putting it across the panel. So coming to Pratik Sinha ji, the question is that, how do we approach to the balance of freedom of press and right to privacy of the individuals in one hand. And the other one is, these fake news are based on the anti-anecdotal evidences. So, it becomes very difficult to trace as we have already decided. So how to make that balance? And we'll quickly close this after you.
Right. So the right to privacy issue comes from the discussion that that Shivam alluded to before. That is, who who should face the repercussion? The person who originated some misinformation, or the person who is just distributing the misinformation willingly or unwillingly? And this is a very tricky debate because number one, from a technological point of view, and because I've been a software engineer for over a decade, and having known that most of the misinformation, a lot of misinformation starts in the WhatsApp domain, which is end-to-end encrypted, it is virtually impossible to track who originates it. At the same point in time, because it is end-to-end encrypted, at the same point in time, uh, all of us, many of us are having more and more conversations on WhatsApp, knowing that it's end-to-end encrypted, because it gives us that privacy, because it is impossible, almost impossible for government to track it unless they spend huge amounts of money for surveillance. We have seen that in cases where, where software like malware slash softwares like Pegasus have been used to to infect different people's phones, etc. Now that takes a lot of money, but in ordinary circumstances it is not that easy to overhear conversations on WhatsApp, etc. So as an individual, I would never want to compromise that sort of privacy. So, which essentially means that, and with more and more end-to-end encrypted systems coming, it is not just WhatsApp. We have Signal, we have Telegram. Also has one of the features as end-to-end encrypted system. Even if you use Facebook Messenger, there is a mode where you can ensure that it's end-to-end encrypted. So with more and more end-to-end encrypted systems coming, which will become sources to put out misinformation, because the people who do put out know that it is impossible to trace them. But giving up that privacy means giving up privacy for the rest of the population who do not have a malicious intent and who can become victims of different kind of targets, whether it is from spammers, scammers, the government itself, if their right to privacy is not respect, or if we take away, for example, the whole conversation around the law minister going at WhatsApp is about how WhatsApp should reveal the originator of information, and WhatsApp claiming that we cannot, because that would mean that we have to end end-to-end encryption. So in my opinion, we should not be looking at who the originator is, and the issue of, because we cannot, it is impossible to determine. And once you give such a law in the hands of the police, who are not trained to actually figure out who's the originator, we will always end up prosecuting somebody who is not responsible, if that becomes the cornerstone of a law, that who originated a piece of misinformation. I think we first need to figure out how to alleviate this issue in the domain of education, and then look at a lesser model where there's lesser repercussions for people at large who put out misinformation or disinformation in an organized manner.
It did not.
Madam, can I add one or 2 points to what Pratik Sinha said?
Sir, I will just take half a second.
Half a minute, not half a second, half a minute.
Half a minute, sir, half a minute.
Okay, see, Pratik is absolutely right. I agree with him. You see, after the Kuppuswamy judgment and the Sri Krishna Commission report, people are expecting a law on privacy to be enacted, but we don't have that law on privacy. So that is a major lacuna, that we do not have a law on privacy in this country. Secondly, one more point that Pratik, when do WhatsApp messages get leaked? We saw the recent case of Mr. Arnab Goswami, when one of his associates who was with the ratings agency, his WhatsApp phone was seized by the police. And then all the WhatsApp messages got leaked to the public. So the point would be, it is really a tricky situation. Today, you have end-to-end encryption, the same social media platform which was used by the ruling party and the ruling dispensation for propaganda purposes to spread fake news to their paid for trolls. Today, it's hurting them because that it's a double-edged sword. So today we have the so-called Congress toolkit and so on and so forth. So this is the thing about the internet, that you get anonymity, but it also cuts both ways.
So we as a citizen of the country don't want to lose our privacy on one hand, and on the other hand, we do want to regulate where we see that there are people who are responsible for it, to be accountable for it.
And most importantly, India does not have a data protection law in place. I think that's very important to point out. Because unless we have a strong data protection law, I mean, what Pratik ji just mentioned about ending end-to-end encryption, it will involve a compromise with right to privacy in ways we've never thought or considered before. So until and unless India has a data protection law, these are things that we should just maybe postpone for another few years.
Okay, so now we move on to the next theme, that is the existing and future legal framework, and to deal with the problem of misinformation and disinformation. Just to brief out what laws we have presently and how these laws are not well equipped to deal with the problem. To start with, we have our Press Council of India, a regulatory body that warns and admonishes or censors the newspaper, the news agency, the editors, or the journalist to disapprove the conduct of the editor or the journalist if it finds that newspaper or news agency has violated journalistic ethics. Secondly, we have News Broadcasters Association, and this association represents the private television, news, and current affairs broadcasters. They are self-regulatory body and proves complaint against electronic media only. Next, we have Indian Broadcast Foundation, who looks into the complaints against the content aired by the channels. Broadcasting Content Complaint Council is there, which admits complaint against TV broadcasters for objectionable TV content and fake news. Indian Penal Code is there, section 295 and 153. 153 talks about wantonly giving provocation with intent to cause riot. And 295 talks about injuries or defiling place of worship with intent to insult religion of any class. Can be invoked to guard against fake news. We have section 66 and 66A of Information Technology Act of 2000. And here we see that quite a few sections are there where punishment can lie for imprisonment for a term which may extend to 3 years and 7 years and 5 years and 5 lakh rupees to up to 5 lakh rupees fine. So and this is the one which is mostly used by the government as well as individual parties if they want to criminalize the act of in a sense it also talks about when right to privacy is being hurt in the electronic media, then in that case, or a social website where they are either WhatsApp or Facebook or etc. Coming to the next one is that the civil law that is of defamation and criminal law of defamation, as sir was talking about decriminalizing the defamation law. 499 and section 500 is there for defamation. Apart from that, Ashish a few minutes said about the Official Secret Act and the RTI. Now, how far it will be acceptable is another question of law. When we see that if the fake news was generated, which is threatening the internal security of the country, then in that case we are having a lot of UAPA provisions which can be used for cyber terrorism or cyber crime as well. So these are few laws which are there, but they are scattered in such a manner that we are unable to club the problem from any way. And in a peaceful manner, we are actually escalating the problem, as we have seen And so I would now open it to again Pratik Sinha ji, because he was the last one to speak in the last theme. Can we trust the government with truth? Is self-regulation an answer?
Well, I don't think we can trust any government in terms of regulating speech. I will give a quick example of how government, few examples, recent examples where the government has tried and sometimes succeeded in shutting down voices and sometimes failed. So first was when Article 370 was that decision was taken vis-a-vis Article 370, and then there were protests in a town called Sora near Srinagar, and the report was put out by Al Jazeera and BBC. And immediately after that, a tweet was put out by HMO saying that this is fake news, quote unquote fake news, that no such thing happened. And eventually the fact checkers, Alt News fact checked it. I think the other fact checkers who also fact checked it. And the government went back and said, okay, such an event happened, but it did not happen at the scale that it did. So the government always has when it comes to regulation, the government would always regulate in favor of its political interests. And that is not specific to any ideology, but especially now, we are seeing it happening more than ever before. I do not think any governments can be trusted in regulating even the new IT rules, which are being pushed, where they are attempting to create a centralized portal where every grievance that an individual may have with a website has to be pushed to this centralized portal, and the government has access to those grievances. Why should the government have access to grievances that an individual has with a website? The government has no business to have access to those grievances. Already, portals like Alt News, and I know Mr. Paranjoy also is fighting multiple defamation cases in law, and already the present laws are being used to push multiple legal notices our way. We are, as small organizations, most of the independent journalism organizations are very small organizations. They are anywhere between 10 people to 50 people. And to spend a large amount of our time running between lawyers in order to take care of these issues, which are either started directly by the government or people who are in close connection with the government, with the full knowledge of the government. That is a big issue. Even my colleague Zubair, a case was booked, he was booked under POXO, and an unimaginable case. I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but it was a tweet which had no elements of POXO. So the government is already misusing laws to attack activists, journalists, etc. So in my opinion, the government cannot be trusted to regulate things in any trustworthy manner.
So with regard to the question, is self-regulation an answer?
Self-regulation is definitely, see, there are multiple things. We are looking at this issue from one prism, that is misinformation. Now, self-regulation, let's say if you get a person who has never seen a traffic light and put him on a traffic island and ask him to deal with a traffic light, that person is not going to be able to deal with traffic light. So unfortunately, what happens is that in a lot of these forums, we look at issue from a singular prism. Self-regulation can happen when people know how to self-regulate. Right now, just now, I mean, as we are talking right now, Mr. Prashant Bhushan, who's very well known in the legal area, is putting out anti-vaccination articles every single day and quoting from far-right websites which have no credibility, absolutely no credibility, is trying to claim that vaccinations don't work. Now, the point is that, and the issues that he's coming up with is that the problem is one of media literacy. If someone like him can put out such articles, not knowing what impact it has, not exercising any sort of carefulness, now can he be expected to self-regulate? I don't think so. But he's not self-regulating because.
So then, what will be the way out, according to you? Being you are the technical person in this panel. My question is that how to deal with it then?
So I don't think we are going to have a solution any sooner. There are multiple avenues that we have to take. This is a very complicated situation, and it is too soon even to talk of a solution. Firstly, do we, there are child kidnapping rumors happening. Are we, and there are people who are getting arrested because these people are going and killing other people. Now that is clearly an offense, but why are they killing other people? Because they are convinced that their children are going to get kidnapped, and that is why the lynchings are happening in case of child kidnapping rumors. But have these people been educated? In Telangana, where a lot of these child kidnapping rumors happen, a lot of illiteracy is there. They are not even looking at WhatsApp messages. They are looking at.
We are still in the problem. We are now towards the end. We want a solution. Sir, I'll give you time.
Give me 2 more minutes. Give me 2 more minutes. I'm trying. The point that I'm trying to make is that solutions to these issues which originate from society, these are not solutions that we can come up with overnight. Whether it is patriarchy, whether it is caste system, etc. These are continuous works in progress. So we have to take small steps. We have to take small steps and then relook at issues and then take another few steps to think that we are going to come up with we are in an infancy in even attempting to understand the issue. And from this point of view, if you're talking about solutions, then whatever solution we come up with, it'll be premature and we'll most probably get it wrong. So this is not the time to talk about bigger. This is a time to talk about smaller steps. Has a single state introduced an education policy around the issue of misinformation? Single Indian state? The answer is no. So how do you even start talking about solutions when even the most basic things have not been done? So that is the point that I'm trying to make.
Ma'am, may I try and answer your question?
Sir, yes, you can go ahead. Then let me put my question, which I thought of putting it to you, and then you go ahead.
You said is self-regulation the answer. Can I try and answer that question to you?
Right, sir, please.
Yes and no. You need a combination of self-regulation and statutory regulation. You mentioned various organizations and you did not mention some others.
Yes, sir, some I missed.
About the News Broadcasting Standards Authority under the News Broadcasters Association. You mentioned the BCCC under the IBF. You did not mention the Advertising Standards Council of India. The problem with all self-regulatory organizations is that those who are not members of these organizations, for them these regulations don't matter. The classic case was Sudarshan News. You go and see the discussion that happened in the Supreme Court about Sudarshan News. They're saying we are not bound by the rules. These are self-regulatory rules. See what Z did in the case of Gohar Raza. They refused to even acknowledge the rules of an association of which they were part of. Now, madam, you mentioned the Press Council of India. I was a member of the Press Council of India for 3 years. It's a quasi-judicial body set up by an act of parliament with no punitive powers. It cannot punish.
So this was my question to you. If I just point out properly, and then your answer will welcome. Is Press Council of India proving to be a toothless tiger, or it deliberately turning a blind eye on fake news propagators? What are the other bodies that have role to play or have failed to fulfill their objective?
All right. So I'll quote a person called Biraj Patnaik, who said to say that the Press Council of India is a toothless tiger is to give it a compliment. So whether a tiger is toothless or not, the person in front of doesn't know. But that toothless tiger can growl and make that person and scare that person. This Press Council cannot even scare anybody. It has no powers. Its writ is confined to the print medium. Today, we have an era of convergence. Today, in the palm of your hand, you have your newspaper, your magazine, your book, your radio station, your television station, and much more. There are 2-3 other regulators you did not mention. The biggest of them is the Information and Broadcasting Ministry itself, the licensing authorities. Then you have the TRAI, the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, which is a technical. And then you also have, in this day and age of over-the-top platform, you have the CBFC, the Central Board of Film Certification. And you've seen how it has been politicized. Now, these are all separate issues. I can talk on each of these subjects for hours on end, but we don't have the time. Madam, in this day and age of the internet and media convergence, I suggest that we need an omnibus body a constitutional authority with punitive powers. This is the way forward. And we need to balance self-regulation with statutory regulation. This has happened in different parts of the world. It's happened in countries like the United States of America, the Federal Communications Commission in countries like the UK, Ofcom in Canada, in Germany, in Australia, and so on and so forth. So you need a combination of both. That's a short answer to your question.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now we move on to Shivam ji. What are the constitutional options that we have or can consider to tackle the disinformation and fake news? We can take recourse of the legal framework from those aspects.
So unfortunately, on this one, I have to absolutely agree with Pratik Sinha ji. There is no solution for this in the constitution or the law. Ultimately, this problem of disinformation and fake news, it comes down to a much bigger societal problem, that people really believe the messages that they get. Once something basically confirms to your biases, you also help spread it without verifying. In a circumstance like this and in a climate like this, especially when the government will always want to control any kind of speech against itself, there cannot be a very simple cut set law where you say, okay, if we pass this act or if we pass this law or we use this constitutional provision, then this problem is going to go away. As Paranjoy Guha Thakurta mentioned, it is going to be a combination of legal provisions plus self-regulation. But how that combination comes about and how we function is not yet very clear, especially because bodies get compromised very easily. It might be a self-regulatory body, it might be a constitutional body. What we have seen in India right now is that people have acted outside of the powers of that body, outside of the laid out procedures of that body, and supported political interests, supported their own personal biases, chosen to prosecute some cases and chosen not to prosecute some other offenses of the exact same crime. So these things do happen. Where the solution will start will inevitably have to be at the societal level, as Pratik Sinha mentioned. It's going to be a very long and very slow process. Up until that point, though, society as a whole needs to side on the side of privacy and on the side of citizens. Because if we give control to the government, if we cede control to the government, thinking that they will regulate fake news and fix this problem, what they would fix is their own political problems. What would happen right now is that they will use the provisions to kill any criticism against themselves on social media, on conventional media, on print media. But the problem of fake news will not go away because some of it would be supporting their causes too. When we come to the question of encryption, as everyone's discussed beforehand, this one is extremely tricky. I have actually been trying to talk to the government about this too. If you break encryption, the government might think that they will get access to the originators of messages or get access to the messages circulated over WhatsApp. What's actually going to happen is that the entire world is going to get access for all of the messages in India. There are going to be state actors and there are going to be non-state actors. Right now, encryption protects us. It protects the politicians, it protects the judges, it protects the bureaucrats from surveillance from other nation states, from non-state actors. If this goes away, I do not know of a single database in the world which cannot be hacked if enough resources are directed at it. If there is a centralized repository of WhatsApp messages, I am extremely sure it's going to be hacked. Someday, it might not happen right now, but even 5 years down the line, it is going to be disastrous for India. These kind of things, I do not think the government even understands yet. So it is a very slow process to reaching regulation. Until then, it can only be education and it can only be telling society about these problems.
So what would be the policy relating to having in place bodies which will be taking care of or fulfill the objective for which we can bring them as a policy maker?
So right now, I think there isn't a specific body that can address something like this. But when a body does come about, what India needs to make sure of is that there are well laid out guidelines which have no room for interpretation. A lot of people will disagree with it because interpretation in general helps regulate things on the fringes and things on the borderline. But I think we have to let go of things on the border and actually just address the main core things that can be classified as disinformation, that can be classified as hate speech, something that very clearly is intended to rouse up religious sentiments during elections, to rouse up caste-based sentiments during elections, should be prosecuted first, should be debated upon first before we discuss things on the margin and on the border.
Thank you, Shivamji. Now, lastly, I'll come to Ashish. There is an opinion which has been generated that, we should criminalize or we should not criminalize, and we came to the consensus that this is not the right time to decide who to be criminalized and how to be criminalized. But my question goes to you, that what according to you think that we should criminalize or we should not criminalize dissemination of fake news and disinformation. Ashish.
Before I come to the question that you've put, I just want to make some introductory comments. Unfortunately, as all of us have pointed out, there's no quick or an easy fix to the problems associated with fake content and disinformation. When we talk about any regulation, including regulation of content or disinformation in particular, we need to ask ourselves if we should become a bad state that imposes, fines or jails people for what they say or write, or should we aspire to become a good state which uses incentives to control misbehavior? We also need to distinguish the private from the public. For instance, lawyers like me, are subject to a various set of regulations where we cannot lie to a client or to the court. Now, you may want to bring a complaint against lawyers like us, but should we apply the same set of standards when we're talking about, public discourse? I don't think so. And a simple reason why I'm against regulations that impede upon free speech and right to privacy, much less criminalization of fake content, as you alluded to in your question, is that it is too hard to define fake news or even disinformation. If you have an overbroad law, you will end up giving sweeping powers to the police and to the regulatory authorities. You will use fake news legislations to stifle political dissent, and that is not healthy for a democracy. At the same time, we do not want the government to tell us what is true and what is fake, because it will label stories and facts as fake because if it does not suit their interests or in order to delegitimize voices. Instead of targeting content, I believe we should be spending our time and effort in regulating the medium, the methods of distribution or dissemination of information. Paranjoy will be a better person to answer as to who can be a trusted gatekeeper, to monitor this problem of fake news. Will it be somebody from the media, somebody from the judiciary, or somebody, or some new autonomous constitutional body with punitive powers? But it definitely cannot be the government. If it is the government, then we already have a host of laws in place. And we have the police, we have the cyber cell, we have the magistrates and their section 144 CRPC orders, we have the IB ministry, we have the IT ministry, and so on and so forth. But as a constitutionalist, I believe that we would do better if we, had little regulatory control on speech and expression of any form, until and unless it is associated with, as I mentioned in my introductory remarks, with imminent harm or violence. Now, coming to your question, criminalization is a complete no, especially when we have less intrusive measures, and it should always be the last resort. We would be living under a rock if we did not notice how these laws are being abused every day to suit the respective interests of the political parties and politicians. We understand how disinformation spreads and how we can control its proliferation. But the short answer is no, we cannot criminalize fake news. And I say that because in a democracy like ours, we lay significant emphasis on protection of speech and expression. And I doubt any law that sweepingly criminalizes content will fail to stand the scrutiny of our constitutional courts. I believe you already have multiple sections in the Indian Penal Code which are meant to tackle certain kinds of content, including content that promotes hatred or incite violence, content that hurt religious sentiments, seditious content, obscene content, defamatory content, etc. And our experience on enforcing, or implementing these laws has not been a positive one. We've had the government to tell us what to wear, what to eat, who to sleep with, and now we don't want the government to tell us what is true and what is false. As Shivam pointed out, we cannot trust the government with truth, or with the fair and uniform implementation of the law. Why have fundamental rights in the Constitution if the government was so trustworthy? So no, in my view, criminalization of fake news is not the answer, because it will have a chilling effect on free speech, and it will provide wide powers to the state authorities to stifle speech and restrict a free flow of ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish. Just to sum up or conclude, there was a very big no relating to criminalization. But the question arises that how to prevent? How, if we don't have, I agree with Paranjoy sir, that, we should have, both self-regulatory as well as some, regulations where we are able to, deal with the problem which we are facing. Now, I do agree that Shivam said that the government in power will be misusing it, whoever is in the power. So what happens is that then how to curb the problem of limiting the power of the government, as well as protecting the privacy rights of the citizen. And then, as Pratik Sinha ji said that, we don't have, when we're talking about this self-regulatory, or people will not be able to self-regulate them, and this is just a starting point. We have just seen the tip of the iceberg of the problem which we are facing today, and we have a long way to go to finally have a law in place. So my question is, whoever wants to answer from the panel, is that how we will be able to deal with the problem. To start with Paranjoy sir, if he highlights it.
I'm repeating what I said. Given the complexities of the very, very fast changing world of the media and information technology and the internet, we have to think of a constitutional authority which is truly independent and autonomous. We have many constitutional bodies which are supposed to be autonomous, with starting from the higher judiciary to the SACJ to the Election Commission of India, but we've seen how the same institutions can be subverted and compromised. So it's all very fine to say what is an ideal situation. Can we have a truly independent, a truly autonomous body? Headed, say, the Press Council of India. It's always been headed by a retired...
Each body will have some of its own biasness, right?
Of course. Yeah, you're saying the Press Council of India has always been headed by a retired judge. Why has it never been headed by a senior journalist? I'm just raising questions to you. What we are seeing, the latest set of changes in the information technology rules and the intermediary guidelines are pointing out exactly what Shivam said, what Pratik said, and what Ashish Goel has said, that you have deliberately put out a very, very cumbersome grievance redressal mechanism. You are shifting, you are giving more powers to the executive and less powers to the judiciary. And the purpose is very clear. It's a political purpose. You want to stifle, you want to curtail dissent. You don't like criticism. It's not just not liking criticism or being intolerant. You are behaving in a vengeful manner. So, madam, there are no easy, quick fix solutions. What Pratik said is very important. I mean, you have to change our society too. We have to improve education, computer.
Okay, sir. Thank you. My question came out of the spot. So I want some questions to be taken out live from the audience as well. And students are keeping on reminding me that, ma'am, some questions from the audience. So these were the questions which we had taken up were from the questionnaire, as I told you. Dipanshu, if you can open the house.
Sure, and thank you, ma'am. Being a privilege of a host, I will first ask my question. My question is directed to Pratik, sir. Sir, currently Alt News is a digital media platform, but we have also seen the instances of misinformation arising from rural background, people in rural India. Like also people in those areas are easily more vulnerable because they don't have access to that digital media from where they can fact check by sites like Alt News. So do you think, what is a challenge do you face as a professional fact checker as well as journalist to deal with these type of instances? Especially I would give an instance of like COVID vaccination. People in rural India are being forwarded WhatsApp news of the like side effects are arising out of vaccination, like impotency and such examples. What do you think is the current challenge? Thank you.
So it is absolutely true that there's a lot of vaccine hesitancy that is being created by misinformation. But I would allude to a previous example where, again, the solution was actually found in the domain of education. Two examples. One, Mr. Muhammad Ali, he was the collector of Kannur in Kerala, and this is a measles rubella vaccine where it was claimed that it is going to create infertility. And what he did was he created this elaborate educational framework where not just the students but the parents were brought in, and the vaccination rates had dropped to some 60% in case of measles rubella vaccine, I think. And because of the the program that he undertook, the vaccination rates went up. The other example that I would allude now, Kannur is a place where literacy levels are high. So one challenge is already taken care of, that you can actually teach people at a certain level. The other example is from Telangana, where Mrs. Rema Rajeshwari, she's the IPS officer, and she was dealing with child kidnapping rumors. And here you're dealing with a population who do not even have literacy. So it is not that you can have regular literacy programs where you teach something as part of a presentation on a blackboard. You have in that case, what she did was she conducted various skits, various street side plays to let people know what the issue of misinformation around child kidnapping rumors are, and that led to it reducing. But in every case that I have come across, not just in India but even outside India, it has been in the information domain that the issue has been dealt with, and not in the legal domain. And which is why, over the past 1.5 years, that is all I keep at least trying to impress upon people, that especially when it comes to rural India, there are so many ways of reaching out to people. So for example, All India Radio, we have so many vaccine rumors. Now the government has access to All India Radio, where you can reach out to people. Is it using that medium to actually take care of this vaccine hesitancy, this vaccination rumors? It is not. So there are avenues of reaching out to people, of alleviating their fears, but unfortunately even those avenues are not being used to deal with it. It is not that thing, the government is helpless. The government is not helpless. The government doesn't care. That is the problem.
Thank you, sir.
Panshu, next question.
Yeah. So we had a question from Achin Jana. Achin sir is a PhD student at NUJS. Achin, I would request you to unmute yourself and start on your video and ask your question.
Is he unmuted?
Yeah, I have enabled an option. Okay, okay, maybe he is not able to ask. So we have a question from Jishnu Narayan. I would request you to unmute yourself and start on your video and ask your question directly. Thank you. Okay, you can ask your question without starting on a video if you want. Then I will read out the question. So Jishnu Narayan has said, I would request you to ask following question. What is the role and the scope of section 1369A of the IT Act 2000 in covering fake news? Secondly, how can search engines like Google be made liable for spreading fake news? Sir, this is the question for Mr. Ashish, sir. Sir, can you please address it?
Ashish?
Maybe he's not here. Shivam sir, if possible, can you please take the question?
How to prosecute Google for fake news?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, honestly, I think there's a much better question for someone in the legal profession.
Yeah.
Okay, it is actually a real challenge because we had quite a few problems where relating to fake news and some sexual
Good evening.
harassment.
I have a question.
Yes, Ganesh.
Yes, good evening to everybody. And sir, my question will be like the new rules that the government is planning in regards to the social media content, wherein the Facebook, WhatsApp, and other social media giants will be liable. So, is it not the encroachment of the rights of expression as provided by the Constitution? And can it be challenged at the initial level in the Supreme Court of India? Thank you.
See, any law if government comes up with can be challenged. There's no problem. The court is going to first hear that does it violates the constitutional rights or not, and if court thinks fit that government did not have power to regulate or come up with a law in this regard, then Supreme Court can actually struck it down as well as unconstitutional. So that is already always there available with every law which comes up.
And,
many laws have been upheld by the government in the name of internal security and integrity of the country. So that is also there on the other hand. You have to remember this, Ganesh.
The recent changes that have been made to the information technology rules have already been challenged. We are already seeing WhatsApp having legally challenged the government. Yes. Now, I think these legal challenges will escalate. At the end of the day, this is not unique to India. But the whole issue is, who is an intermediary, I beg your pardon. Who is an intermediary? What are his liabilities? What should be what are called the safe harbor provisions? What WhatsApp did to change its privacy laws for its rules, rather, for its business consumers, it could not have done in Europe, because there they would be violating the privacy. But in our country, you don't have a privacy law. And I'll come back to the new IT rules. In my opinion, the intention of the government is very important. In this case, we are questioning the intention of the government. And the intention of the government seems to be very clearly curbing political dissent, those media platforms which are critical of the government. So this is, so we can't look on these laws unless we also put it in a certain political context, a certain social context.
I just want to add a couple of things. Firstly, one needs to understand what is the role of the platform, because the first question that was put out, that itself is a problematic question. Can Google be prosecuted for fake news? Now, Google is not the originator of information. What are the issues with different platforms? That is also the first thing that one needs to understand. So Google in this case is a search engine. Facebook is a social media platform, while WhatsApp is a peer-to-peer messaging system, and all these three platforms work differently, and there are different issues associated with these platforms. For example, what is the problem associated with Google? The problem is, for the longest time, the problem is, at least till about 3 years ago, one of the biggest problem was conspiracy theories coming up in search engines while legitimate information going down. So the problem was with search rankings. It was not that Google was creating that content, but Google being the largest search engine and having an absolute monopoly. And this word monopoly here is very important, because each one of these platforms have become have monopolies, and which is why we are having so many issues. So Google having a complete monopoly on the search space there are a bunch of people sitting in San Francisco who are dictating what the search algorithms will be. Yes, now we have people in India as well, but initially that is where a lot of focus is coming from. And the problem is that for example, recently we did a article on how YouTube is putting out conspiracy theories about different issues, from anti-vaxxers, etc. So can they be made liable for that? Again, I'm not in the right place to answer that question, but I can define what the question is. That can you make platforms like Google and YouTube, who are primarily search engines, can you make them liable for promoting content through their algorithms, which increase the issue of misinformation in the society? What is the problem with Facebook? It is different from Google and YouTube. Facebook is one of the richest social media companies, with its revenues being more than many countries together. And the problem here is that their business model, and which Mr. Paranjoy has written an entire book on, their business model relies on promoting sensational content. That is where they earn money from, because what is their business model? If there are advertisers on the platform, if you see advertisements, they earn money. So they incentivize more and more people spending more and more time on these platforms. How do you get people to spend more and more time on the platform? By creating more sensational content, by creating more polarized pockets in the society, on social media platforms. So let's say if I am constantly given information that I agree with, that my ideological biases adhere with, then I'm going to invest more time in that pocket of social media. Now, can Facebook be made liable for such polarization in the society, where it has actually caused exoduses in countries like Myanmar, etc.? Now, that is the question. So even as far as these platforms are concerned, it is very important to understand these platforms from a technological perspective, and then frame the questions as to what are the problems with these platforms. And a lot of problems arise from the very business model of these platforms, which can be regulated in different ways. You don't have to regulate the content. You figure out how to fix the business model of these platforms.
Pratikji, what about Twitter? Twitter is in...
So Twitter is pretty much like Facebook, except that Twitter is a much more open platform. But again, the recent issue, where it went and marked a certain number of posts of BJP leaders as manipulated media. Now, the problem is, what is manipulated media? So the problem with all these platforms is one of absolute lack of consistency and very opaque policies. So what is manipulated media? Manipulated media is that, let's say if you take a photograph or a video and you morph it, change it, and put it out in a way to mislead people. Now, Twitter went and marked multiple posts by BJP leaders claiming that, about this whole Congress toolkit issue. Now, we have, at All News, we have already put out articles which talk about how the whole Congress toolkit thing, the screenshots are not authentic. But what Twitter does is that it wakes up once every few months and starts tagging things as manipulated media. Just day before yesterday, we put out a story where Miss Sonia Gandhi, on the back of her, there are certain books, and there a book has been morphed to claim that she has a book which says how to convert India into a Christian nation. Now, that photograph was not there. It was morphed. Did Twitter mark that as manipulated media? No. So what is the basis? And the problem is that there is all these platforms is one thing in common, that whatever policies that they have defined for themselves, they repeatedly fail to execute those policies. They execute these policies depending on their business interests. In the US, they will go ahead and ban President Trump. But in India, they can't even ban a lowly troll because the government will come after them. So there is absolutely no consistency in terms of them executing their policies.
Thank you, Pratik ji. So at the end, Dipanshu, we have any more questions?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, we have a question from Surja sir, our faculty advisor.
Okay,
I'll
okay,
request sir to please unmute himself and ask the question.
Hello.
Yes, sir, you're audible, sir.
Yes, Surjo, we can hear you.
Yes, ma'am, and all the respected there. Sir, I was thinking that when in abroad, we have a situation that when any sensitive information or data is disseminated by someone, a pop-up message, a warning message comes up, and it informs that what kind of law you are infringing and what can be the consequences of it. Maybe this can be a sort of soft law or soft measure which would inform the citizens, which may not know that what they are disseminating or what they are sharing may have any such of concerns which all of you have mentioned right now. And also similarly, at the same time, the IP address can be also be automatically gone to the law enforcement agencies, who can also review about the matter, that what kind of issues it may have had. So, sir, in your opinion, whether this can be some good for the Indian? Thank you, sir.
I'll weigh on the technological aspect of issues. And firstly, what is an IP address? IP address is nothing but the address of a computer on the internet. Now, when you're saying that, automatically send IP addresses to the government, it is a huge privacy issue, because for reasons I need not enumerate. But on top of that, there are multiple people who often use one IP address. For example, if you're in a university, the university will have only one public IP address. It will be almost impossible to figure out who in a university, even if you were going to, I'm saying that it's a very bad idea, but let's say even if you were to entertain that thought for a minute, in a university, all the content that goes out from typically one or two public IP addresses. And it will be impossible to figure out which individual within a university actually put out that content, because they are on private IP addresses, which never go out in the public domain. Regarding the second question, to me, it seems like a huge overreach, because you cannot sort of implicitly threaten people with saying that you may be violating a certain law by putting out certain information. That in my opinion will also have a chilling effect, because people will not have the confidence to put out information, because firstly, people don't understand laws and things like that. These are things that actually scare the common people.
Yes, I completely add. Yes, sir.
I add to what Pratik said. The question that Mr. Surja asked, even if you have a pop-up message, it's a bit like the warning on a cigarette pack saying, cigarette smoking causes cancer. It's injurious to your health. It's not going to stop the chain smoker from smoking, but at least it's a soft warning. But what Pratik said, I want to add to it, at the end of the day, we have some basic fundamental issues which we have to look at. And that goes back to the points that Shivam made, the points that Ashish Goel made. What is public and what is private? Whether it's Facebook, whether it's Google, whether it's Twitter, these are privately owned corporate conglomerates, huge corporate conglomerates, headed by some of the richest people in the world. Their turnover is more, as Pratik pointed out, than the GDP of many countries put together. But at the end of the day, they want to maximize their profits. Do you treat the internet as a public utility? Is it like electricity? Is it like water? Even if it's a monopoly, even if it's a natural monopoly, because then you have rules for electricity distribution and electricity generation and water distribution and air. So these are things. So, and linked to that becomes the bigger issue of human intervention versus machine intervention. How much can machines learn? What is artificial intelligence? How much can algorithms teach you? And where do human intervention come in? I have been trolled saying UMCBC. Now everybody here in this group knows what MC and what BC is. But the algorithm may say MC is master of ceremonies and BC is before Christ. So the point is, these are some of the key issues that we must grapple with.
I want to add another quick point. So I've been to many such conferences, so here law college is having conference. I've gone to education. The other problem is that this issue is actually an issue that encompasses that deals with multiple issues in the society, from education to cultural biases to historical issues. I mean, a lot of misinformation that we end up dealing with is because 70 years ago there was a partition. So there's a historical nature to it. It is not that misinformation in India is same as misinformation in Vietnam. No, it is different. Misinformation changes from one country to another country based on their history and things like that. So it's very much, there are multiple verticals from the society need to come together and talk about it, and not talk about it in vacuums, because otherwise we always end up talking about in vacuum, where only the legal luminaries are talking about an issue, whereas that issue has the impact of that issue is on multiple other fields. So yeah, that's the only small point that I want to talk about.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am, we have one last question. This is for Mr. Shivam. Yeah. Shivam sir, question is for you. Like, you have worked under various political parties as well as member of IPAC. So do you think if political parties decide among themselves that they should not promote this and they should end this problem of misinformation, fake news, will we have a better place? Will be in a better position?
So the way I usually answer that question is that political parties, when physical ballots happened, were very happy to basically rig ballot boxes, take 50 people into a booth where polling happened, take over the entire booth, throw everyone out, and cast all the ballots. So if a political party is willing to do that to win elections, then expecting political parties to say, okay, we will not circulate fake news, even though it helps us get votes, is just not going to happen.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
Completely agreed with Shivam. So let's close down now. Thank you all. Now we will go ahead for the vote of thanks.
Yeah. Thank you for all the respective panelists. I would like to especially thank Pratik Sinha sir, Shivam Shankar Singh sir, Paranjoy Guha Thakurta sir, Ashish Goel sir. I would also like to thank Manish Tiwari sir. He joined us initially. Maybe he had some technical problem at his end. He could not continue. Now I would like to request Mansi Lodha, the member of Society for Advancement of Criminal Justice, to close down the session by giving an official vote of thanks. Mansi, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Respected panelists, Mr. Ashish Goel, Mr. Paranjoy Guha Thakurta, Mr. Pratik Sinha, and Mr. Shivam Shankar Singh, respected Vice Chancellor, Dr. N.K. Chakraborty sir, our moderator and co-panelist, respected Dr. Kavita Singh, respected faculty members, and dear participants. It is my privilege to offer thanks on this occasion. I, Mansi Lodha, of the Society for Advancement of Criminal Justice, take this opportunity on behalf of the entire society to express our heartfelt gratitude for the informative and thought-provoking talk. It was truly an enlightening panel discussion on relevant issues of legal framework to deal with disinformation and fake news. We had some very interesting observations, like definition of misinformation and disinformation, reasonable restriction to be imposed, liability, privity, internet being a double-edged sword, lack of data protection law, and the extent of government regulation and self-regulation. It was indeed a pleasure listening to all the panelists. We're sure the valuable observations you have raised will help both legal fraternity and social activists at large in the days to come, and provide them with vital materials over which legal discourse can be promoted. Secondly, we would like to thank Dr. Kavita Singh for moderating and co-paneling this session, for providing useful views to us, asking pertinent questions, and also for helping us organize this session in a very smooth manner. We would like to also thank Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir, faculty members of NUJS, and a faculty in charge, Faisal Sir and Surja Sir, for their support in organizing this panel discussion. Finally, we would like to thank all the participants for actively participating and asking such astute questions that made this event extremely engaging for budding lawyers and others watching this lecture. Thank you everyone for joining our panel discussion. We at SACJ promote to host more enlightening lectures in days to come. It was indeed a pleasure to interact with the panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Manisha. I would also request all the panelists that when the new normal comes up, we all will be physically organizing this program, maybe a whole day program through the SACJ, where we deliberate on individual issues for hours together and get a lot of time. Like we could not actually reach to get that technical details which were required to be discussed with the help of, sharing the screen and, how the participant would learn what is an URL and how they are being misused. With regard to, the physical presence, eye-to-eye contact and discussions are much liver than the one we had just now. So I would open it to all of you with a lot of heartiest welcoming to our campus and have a physical program together. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.